I remember the morning of my seventh choosing. Choosing the way you remember a funeral you already know is coming. The light came through the crystal walls of the hatching cavern in long golden ribbons, and all around me, hundreds of hatchlings were stretching their wings and practicing their telepathic calls. They filled the cavern with bright, dazzling pulses of thought, colors and sounds and promises projected outward like fireworks, each one screaming the same thing in a different way. Pick me! Pick me! I am strong, I am beautiful, I am worthy. I sat in the back, near the cracked wall where my egg had been found 7 cycles ago. I was small. My scales were the color of cold ash. One of my horns grew slightly crooked, curving left where it should have grown straight, and my eyes did not match. One was gold like a proper dragon's eye, and the other was a dull, flat copper that caught no light. I had learned a long time ago not to stretch my wings when the others did. It only reminded me how much smaller mine were. My name is Virith, and for 6 choosings, no one had wanted me. The choosing is supposed to be the most important day in a dragon's life. Delegates from across the galaxy travel to our moon, Cathara, to find their partners. When a dragon bonds with a chosen companion, both of them share power, purpose, and lifespan. The bond is sacred. It is the whole reason we exist. And every cycle, the great species arrive. The Silkari with their ships of living light, the Gorvan in warships that shake the ground beneath your claws, the Tesserine drifting in as clouds of spores before reforming into walking shapes, the Velikun gliding in pressurized suits with 8 pale eyes scanning everything. They come, they choose, and they leave. And every cycle, a handful of hatchlings are left behind. I had been left behind 6 times. The first time, I was too young to understand what was happening. A Silkari delegate, tall, luminous, with antennae that glowed like captured starlight, had walked past me without stopping. I reached out with my mind, trying to call to her, trying to send the brightest thought I could. She paused for half a second, tilted her head, and then moved on. I heard her whisper to her companion as she passed. That one has no signal. The third time, a Gorvan warlord, enormous, four-armed, with scales thicker than mine would ever be, picked me up in one massive hand and stared at me. I held still. I tried to look strong. He grunted, set me down, and said one word, "Runt." Then he walked away and chose a hatchling twice my size, whose scales were the color of blood. The 5th time was the worst. A Tesserine collective reached toward me with a single pale tendril. I felt the touch of 1,000 minds pressing against mine, searching, cataloging, trying to absorb my thoughts into their network. For one glorious second, I thought they had found me. Then the tendril recoiled, as though it had touched something rotten. "Its mind is strange," the collective said in their layered voice. "Too individual, too quiet. We cannot absorb this pattern." They moved on without looking back. After that, I stopped trying to make myself bright. I stopped practicing my calls. I sat in my corner and watched the others get chosen, and I whispered the same words to myself so many times that they stopped being words and became something else. A scar, a fact, a gravity I could not escape. No one ever chose me. On the morning of the 7th choosing, the broodmother came to me. She was ancient and vast, her scales the deep blue of a dying star, and her eyes held the weight of every hatchling she had ever watched grow or fade. She lowered her great head until her eye was level with mine, and she spoke gently. "Virith, this is the final cycle. You know what happens if you are not chosen today." I knew. The dim vaults, a cold underground place where unbonded dragons lived out quiet, diminished lives without purpose, without flight, without ever knowing what it felt like to be part of something larger than themselves. I had seen older, unchosen dragons escorted there after their final choosing. They walked with their heads down and their wings folded tight against their bodies, as though they were trying to make themselves disappear. "I know," I said. The broodmother looked at me for a long time. Then she turned away, and I saw something in her expression I had never seen before. Not pity. Something deeper. Something that looked like an apology she did not know how to speak. The delegations arrived throughout the morning, and I watched them the way I always did. From the back, from the shadows, from the place where no light reached. The Silkari swept through first, their telepathic fields blazing, bonding with the brightest hatchlings in bursts of golden radiance. The Gorvon came next, clasping claws with the largest and most powerful. The Tesserine absorbed 3 hatchlings into their network in a single, unsettling wave. The Veluan tested frequencies with delicate precision, selecting partners whose minds matched their own crystalline patterns. And then, last, so late that most of the delegates had already begun to leave, a single shuttle descended from the sky. It was small. It was old. It landed crookedly on the stone platform outside the cavern, and one of its landing struts made a sound that suggested it would not survive another trip. I watched a single figure step out. She was small, smaller than any delegate I had ever seen. She had no armor, no glowing antennae, no 4 arms, no pressurized suit. She wore simple clothes that looked like they had been washed many times. She carried one worn bag over her shoulder. Her hair was dark and tied back from her face, and her skin was a warm brown that reminded me of the earth after rain. A human. I had heard of them. The newest species in the Accord, granted a single seat at the choosing as a political gesture. No telepathy, no psionic field, no natural abilities that any other species considered remarkable. The Accord's master of ceremony announced her presence with barely concealed disdain, reminding everyone that humans had no recorded successful bonding in galactic history. A Gorvon delegate laughed. The sound echoed through the cavern like a stone dropped into a well. The human did not react. She stood at the entrance of the cavern and looked up at the crystal walls, and the expression on her face was not one I had ever seen on a delegate before. It was not hunger. It was not ambition. It was not the sharp, calculating look of someone evaluating merchandise. It was wonder. She looked at the cavern the way a child looks at the sky the first time they understand that the stars are real. And something about that expression made me stop breathing for a moment, though I did not know why. As the choosing continued, I watched her. She did not push forward like the others. She stood at the edges of the room, quiet and still, while hatchlings approached her out of curiosity. When they came close, she did not grab them or test them or scan their minds. She crouched down, lowered herself to their level, and held out her hand, palm open, fingers relaxed. She waited. She let them decide. Most of them sniffed her hand, sensed no telepathic signal, and wandered away confused. One hatchling snapped at her fingers. She did not flinch. She just pulled her hand back slowly and murmured something so soft I could not hear it from across the cavern. A Silkari delegate approached her. "You have no psionic field, human," the Silkari said, and the condescension in their voice was so thick it was almost visible. "You cannot bond. You are wasting your time and theirs." The human looked at the Silkari. She was so much smaller, standing in the shadow of those glowing wings, and yet she did not shrink. She said quietly, "Maybe, but I am here, so I will stay." The choosing neared its end. The cavern emptied. Bonded pairs departed in light and celebration, and the stone floor grew cold where their warmth had been. I sat with the last of the unchosen, 11 of us now, huddled near the back wall like forgotten things. The broodmother began the quiet, sorrowful process of preparing us for the dim vaults. And the human was still there. She sat cross-legged on the stone floor, alone, her bag beside her, watching the last light filter through the crystals. A Gorvon delegate passed her on his way out. "Go home, human," he said. "There is nothing here for your kind." She did not answer. She sat. She breathed. She looked at us, at the unchosen ones, and her expression was not pity. It was something I had no word for. It was the look of someone who recognized the shape of a feeling she had carried herself. I do not know why I stood up. It was not a telepathic pull. It was not the ancient instinct of bonding that the broodmother had described to us when we were small. It was something else, something quieter, something that lived below all the frequencies I had spent my life trying to broadcast on. The closest word I can find for it, even now, is safety. I walked toward her. My claws clicked on the stone. The other unchosen watched me go, and I felt their confusion and their fragile, desperate hope pressing against my back like heat. I stopped a few paces away from her. She saw me. She did not reach out. She did not beckon. She did not lunge forward with scanning instruments or telepathic probes. She just looked at me, really looked, and her expression shifted. Her brow furrowed. Her eyes softened. She tilted her head to one side. the way someone does when they are listening to a sound that no one else can hear. And I did something I had never done with a delegate before. I whispered, not telepathically. My telepathic voice had never been strong enough for anyone to hear. I whispered in the old draconic tongue, barely louder than a breath, words I had said only to myself in the dark. No one ever chose me. She had no telepathy. She had no translator configured for Hatchling Draconic. She could not have understood the words, but something crossed her face. A tremor, a recognition, a crack in the calm surface of her expression. And I watched her eyes fill with light that was not bioluminescent, or psionic, or generated by any technology I had ever seen. It was simply water, simply tears. She pressed her hand against her own heart. Then she extended it toward me, palm open, the same way she had offered it to every hatchling before me. But this time, her fingers were trembling. I stepped forward and pressed my crooked horn into her open palm. The warmth started at the place where we touched, and spread outward through my whole body, slowly, gently, like the first light of morning, moving across a dark landscape. There were no fireworks, no explosion of psychic energy, no blinding radiance that forced the witnesses to shield their eyes. There was just warmth, deep, steady, patient warmth, that hummed at a frequency so low it vibrated in the stone beneath us and in the ancient crystal of the cavern walls. The broodmother froze. The remaining delegates turned. A Silkari emissary's glowing eyes went wide. The bonding signature was unlike anything in recorded galactic history. It was not loud. It was not bright. It pulsed low and deep, like a heartbeat heard through water, and it filled the cavern with a resonance that made the crystals sing in a key they had never sung in before. They told me later what they discovered, that my telepathic frequency was never absent. It was simply lower than any species in the galaxy had evolved to detect. Every telepathic race that had tested me was listening on frequencies far above mine, the way someone shouting into a storm cannot hear the person whispering beside them. I was never silent. I was speaking a language that only one species in the entire galaxy had the capacity to hear. Humans do not have telepathy. They do not project. They do not dominate. They do not absorb. They do something that, to every other species in the Accord, seems impossibly simple and impossibly rare. They receive. They listen, not to minds, but to the things that live beneath language, the ache, the loneliness, the quiet desperation of a creature that has stopped hoping anyone will hear. They evolved, on their small blue world, not to overpower the signals around them, but to sit with suffering they cannot fix and stay anyway. They call this empathy. They do not consider it a superpower. They do not even consider it unusual. And yet, it is the rarest ability in the known galaxy. On the shuttle home, her battered, crooked, wonderful shuttle, Ilara heated a simple meal and adjusted a blanket around my wings, because the cabin was cold. She hummed a song I did not recognize. It was tuneless and imperfect, and completely, entirely human. I curled against her side and felt the bond between us, that low, warm hum. And I understood something that 6 choosings of silence had never taught me. I was never broken. I was never defective. I was never empty. I was just speaking in a whisper, in a galaxy that only knew how to shout. And she heard me. She heard me because she is the kind of creature who walks toward the quiet, not away from it. The kind who sits on a cold stone floor alone after everyone else has gone. The kind who holds out her hand, palm open, expecting nothing, offering everything. The Silkari hear minds like symphonies. The Gorvon sees power like conquest. The Tesserine absorb consciousness like a hunger that is never satisfied. But humans do the one thing none of them can do. They hear the ones who whisper. They sit beside the ones who have stopped hoping. They choose the ones no one else will choose. And they stay. No one ever chose me, until a quiet human sat down on a stone floor and listened to the silence and heard me breathing inside it.